The Serbu RN-50 is a 50 caliber breech loading rifle developed and marketed by Serbu Firearms in conjunction with YouTuber Royal Nunsuch. At $1,600, it's a relatively inexpensive entry to the 50 caliber rifle market, and if the wait times to buy one are any metric to go by, they have become pretty popular in the last couple years. On April 9, 2021, YouTuber Scott Deseals, known on YouTube as Kentucky Ballistics, was filming a video with his father demonstrating the capability of Serbu light armor penetrator or SLAP ammunition through the RN-50. After 4 firings, an overpressure event occurred leading to the catastrophic failure of the firearm. The Serbu RN-50 utilizes a hinge between the upper and lower receiver, where a threaded breech cap can be removed to insert the 50 caliber cartridge. 2 retention ears ensure the breech cap is fully seated before the lower can be locked into place and the rifle fired. In Scott's case, the threaded breech cap stripped itself off of its threads, ejecting the cap and shearing both of the retention ears rearwards towards the shooter. The cap struck Scott in the face, temporarily blinding him and breaking his nose and orbital bone in 3 places. The first retention ear passed through Scott's hat, narrowly missing his skull. The second retention ear entered Scott's neck, severed his jugular vein and traveled down into his chest, piercing and deflating his right lung. Thanks to the fast action of Scott's father and the combined experience between the two, Scott survived the failure by jamming his thumb into his neck to stop the bleeding until they made it to the hospital. He made a video about it about 2 weeks later. Mark Serbu, owner of Serbu Firearms, released a statement immediately after Scott's video praising Scott for his recovery. He then offered reassurance to his customers that the RN-50 is a safe firearm, and implied that the detonation was outside of the gun's defined use case. Now there's something I need to make clear. No engineer could account for every use case for a firearm, but ammunition detonations are always a possibility and need to be accounted for in the firearm's design. For instance, the AR-15. If a cartridge is overloaded, or if someone accidentally beats a 300 blackout into the chamber, the bolt carrier actually has a feature that helps keep the operator safe in the resulting overpressure event. Whether this was specifically designed this way or not, the cutouts in the bolt carrier for the magazine feed lips make thin webs of material that will break before the receiver fails in an overpressure event. This sends the majority of the dangerous pressure and gases downwards through the magazine well and away from the shooter. Another example is the Beretta M9. Early in its deployment, the Beretta M9 pistol had an issue where its slide would crack and break in half due to hot ammunition. This would send the rear section of the slide off the back of the rails and into the face of whoever was shooting it. This was remedied by Beretta by increasing the diameter of the head of the hammer pin and placing a channel for it in the slide. This pin would then prevent the rear section of the slide from shooting rearward and striking the user. Even if this slide failure occurred in the future, this simple feature would stop the operator from getting hurt. As of the writing of this script, Mark Serbu has not made any changes to the design of the RN-50 to reduce the likelihood of another catastrophic failure, nor to adjust the mode of failure to not seriously injure the operator. I know this because I specifically asked him. He replied that no changes have been made. Mark Serbu's RN-50 blow-up YouTube series mainly features an ammunition-centric analysis instead of a design-centric one. While understanding the root cause of the failure is important, Mark seemed to shift the majority of the blame for what happened to the firearm onto the faulty ammunition, instead of trying to understand why the firearm failed the way it did. I think that this was a major oversight in a situation where the mode of failure of his design put the operator's life at risk. This bothered me, but not nearly as much as this following clip from one of his updates.
I can't tell you how many comments I read when people were like, "Oh, I knew this was going to happen. Yeah, that screw cap, that thing's just weak. That's screw." Yeah, well, where were you people before this happened? If you want to be heroes, you would have sounded the alarm beforehand. Obviously, they're full of shit.
As one of the heroes who sounded the alarm after the fact, I can proudly say I was not sitting around designing your guns for you before this incident occurred. That being said, since I am a design and manufacturing engineer for the defense industry, and a bit of an asshole, I'll gladly do so now. The first change I would make to this design is to change the threads of the breech cap to a buttress thread profile. This will provide superior strength in the direction of force when the rifle is fired, especially compared to a V-thread profile, which is being used currently. Acme or stub Acme thread profiles would also work well in high axial load applications, in case buttress isn't your style. The second change I would make revolves around the receiver. Specifically, by adding material to the rear end of the receiver, we can help prevent the ears from shearing off and becoming projectiles in an overpressure event. Mark also commented on this proposed solution in his video, and stated that building up material on these ears would make them more dangerous if they were to shear off.
So if you've got these ears being shoved back with tens of thousands of pounds of force, okay, if they just kind of shear right off, if they're kind of weak, then they go on their way and they clip you and go into your chest. Okay, but now what if it takes a hell of a lot more energy to shear those things off? So that means before they fly off that action, they've been given a hell of a lot more energy, and then when they fly off, guess what? They're going Mach 1 or something. And now they don't just slice you on the way by, they freaking chop your head off. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. The bottom line is that if they do have a lot more energy imparted to them, they are going to fly off there with a hell of a lot more velocity, a hell of a lot more energy, and they're going to be even more dangerous. So in your quest to try to be safer, you may be more unsafe.
So the obvious question here is, how can it get worse if they're already lethal? The ears are already lethal projectiles if they shear off, so you don't really lose anything by trying to make them stronger. The last thing I would change about the RN-50 is the barrel, specifically the addition of a small hole near the case mouth. This is a bit more experimental, but it's meant to work like a one-time use pressure relief valve for detonations. Ideally, this small web of material would fail before the breech cap would, in the case of a high-pressure event. The web of material should be strong enough to not blow out in normal operation, but weak enough that it's the first feature to fail if the pressure in the barrel gets too high. If this pressure relief feature does what it's designed to do in an overpressure event, it should uncork the barrel and release the pressure into the relative safety of the handguard before the breech cap fails. Kentucky Ballistics' accident is an important reminder to us engineers that our design decisions can very often have consequences we weren't expecting. In this regard, we need to take responsibility for what we create and the impact it has on people. These changes to the design should be relatively simple and inexpensive to implement, and should make the rifle safer in the case of an overpressure event. I thoroughly believe that the mode of failure of the Serbu RN-50 needs to be fixed. When this failure happens again, which it will eventually if nothing changes, I believe it will result in the death of the operator.